Hello, hello. All right, we are going to talk about theme today. Fiction themes. They are nebulous. They are often difficult to pin down and even harder to plan, at least for most people. What I can tell you is that fiction themes, what they actually are and how to create them are not taught correctly in our space from what I've seen. But we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of that today in this episode. First, though, I'd like to say a quick word on characters. Everyone knows we need to write dynamic main characters, right? If you want to write characters who jump off the page, the key is to understanding their character wound, their limiting belief, and how they're going to change at the end of the story. This means that you need to explore their backstories, their beliefs, their fears, their insecurities, and their desires. Now, that may sound like a tall order, but I promise it's not as complicated as it sounds. You just have to know the right questions to ask, and I can teach you that inside of the Legendary Fiction Forge. I have an entire module on how to write protagonists that jump off the page, and next month, in just over a week here, we're going to be covering villains as well. Villains are one of my favorite things to talk about, so I'm really excited. Crafting them is a little bit different than crafting your protagonist, but they are also endlessly more fascinating in my totally objective opinion. So if you want to learn how to craft heroes and heroines and villains that jump off the page, if you'd like to get a step-by-step process for crafting them and communicating them on the page to your reader, check out the Legendary Fiction Forge at bit.ly/Fiction Forge, which will also be in the show notes. Here we go. Okay, so what is theme? Have you ever wondered what theme is? Have you ever even tried to craft one? If so, more power to you. Because most authors, they don't even attempt it because it's too nebulous and they just hit walls, not knowing exactly what to do or how to go about it. I said before the intro that this is not well taught. That's putting it mildly. It actually drives me batty how people teach or attempt to teach or sometimes don't bother to teach theme, all right? So if you've ever Googled fiction theme or read, free writing advice online about this, you've probably experienced this before. They attempt to define theme in a very broad and, quite frankly, unhelpful way, like theme is the subject or topic of a piece of writing. You're going, great, thanks, that was real helpful, I'll get right on that. Yeah, no, that's not helpful at all, right? Or, okay, how about this definition? Here's another one. A central idea or underlying meaning that the writer explores through the characters, setting, dialogue, plot, or a combination of these elements. Okay, admittedly that one is better, it's more specific, but it still doesn't tell you how to come up with your theme. Like, what are the actual steps, right? That's what's not well taught. So the advice generally given is either very generic, like, think about what your story is trying to say, and, again, not helpful. I mean, I might say something like, my story is trying to say that dragon riders are badass. Is that my theme? No, it's not your theme. Okay, so they either do that or they give you this advice that I hear a lot. And again, it drives me nuts. Just start writing and your theme will emerge. Ugh, guys, that's the kind of advice that makes me want to scratch my own eyes out, okay? Let's go back to the definition of a focused story. If you want a cohesive, highly focused, which means highly emotional, if it's highly focused, it will be highly emotional, story, you need to be writing toward an ending and toward a theme. Otherwise, you're going to end up having the same problem in general that people do when they pants their story. You're going to be all over the place, you're going to be going off the rails, and it's going to feel floopy, to quote Phoebe Buffay, rather than tight and cohesive. Now, once again, I am not throwing shade at pantsers. If you need to do some pantsing to figure out what your story is and to figure out what your theme is, more power to you. Some people, that is just the way they write. It's just part of their process, and that's wonderful. But don't start writing your story until you've nailed down your theme, or your story is going to be all over the place. And what did we learn about just in the last episode, 234? You want to really, really infuse the emotion and make sure that there is a lot of emotion in every part of your story. Well, I've got news for you. If you do not know what theme you're writing toward, that automatically kills the emotion in your story. And there go your sales, right down the drain, okay? So why does this happen? Why don't we know how to craft our themes? why is this the prevailing advice in our space? It is important to understand this. Well, I mean, it's pretty much the reasons I've already talked about. Most people think they should just start writing, and I mean, I don't even know that they believe the theme will come to them, or they just hope and pray that it will. And guys, once again, hoping and praying for something without really knowing how to create it, it's just not the most intelligent way to write your story, okay? There's nothing empowering about that. You're just hoping you don't screw it up, basically. And that's not fun. That's not going to keep you from being stressed out, right? Honestly, this isn't really anybody's fault. The problem is that people don't understand the function of a story's theme. And that's because it's an invisible element, okay? It's not as tangible as your characters or the events of your plot. So, I mean, obviously, all of this is fiction, so all of it is in our imagination, but we can visualize what our characters look like. We can imagine what they say. We can imagine the events of the plot as they're unfolding, right? We can imagine what the setting looks like. You don't really imagine your theme. It's more nebulous than those other things, okay? It's less tangible, even in our heads. And so because of that, people have a hard time nailing it down. But I want you to consider this. Think about a computer programmer. My dad is a computer programmer, which means that he gets paid to create software, like completely from scratch, that serves a particular function for the company that's paying him. So they will say, hey, we need you to create software that does X, Y, and Z, and we'll pay you for it. And he says, okay. And then he goes and he creates that software. Now, of course, as he starts creating it, bugs are going to come up, things are going to work, not work, he'll have to go back, he'll have to fix this, and he just slowly makes his way through until he figures out, how to create that software that does what they need it to do. But can you imagine if he sat down to create it and didn't know what the function was? And they were just going, well, create us some software. We're not sure what it does. Just start creating, and I'm sure it'll come to you. Okay, it's ridiculous. It is a ridiculous example. And don't get me wrong, if he really were just noodling around, trying to get to know a program or, trying to invent something new and just exploring a little bit, that would be fine. But when you're actually trying to accomplish something, when you're actually trying to go somewhere with it, you need to know what the end game is. You need to know what the function is. Otherwise, nothing's ever going to happen. It's not going to serve anybody, and it's certainly not going to do the thing that you want it to do if you don't know what the thing is, right? It's the same way with your theme. You need to know what you're writing toward. You need to know what you're trying to say with your story. I mean, having some really cool events or a great romance or a really, high-octane scene or something, those are all great. They're great elements of story, but if they're not part of a whole that's going somewhere, the reader still isn't going to connect deeply with it, okay? So your theme, you need to know what it is before you start writing if you want to create a focused story. And remember, focused stories create emotion, and emotion sells, okay? Very, very important. So what things do we need to know then in order to create our theme? I'm going to tell you what they are. 3 main things. So grab your pen or pencil and write these down. You need to know your story ending. And by that, I mean plot-wise. You need to know how it's going to end, because that's going to be integral for how your theme plays out. Number 2, you need to know your character's limiting belief, their limiting belief. And 3, you know how they are going to change and overcome it. Or if they aren't, you need to know that they aren't. So here's the rundown. The theme really springs from the character's internal arc. And this is one of the main reasons I always tell you guys that you need to plan the internal arc first, that it is the foundation of your story, not the afterthought, okay? Because if you don't have the internal arc nailed down, you don't have a theme. And once again, if you don't have a theme, you have an unfocused story. If you have an unfocused story, it's not going to sell well, period, okay? So you need to nail down your character's internal arc. So the basic gist is this. The character has a wound sometime in their past that has given rise to a limiting belief. Sometimes this might be called a misguided belief. Sometimes you'll hear it called the lie the character believes. Inside the Legendary Fiction Forge, we go way deeper than the lie the character believes. We go into psychology, elements of spirituality, human transformational psychology, all of that. But the point is, they have this limiting belief. Your plot, what actually happens in the story, represents the circumstances that you've plopped your character into that will eventually force them to confront their misguided belief and hopefully overcome it. Now, of course, they don't have to overcome it. It depends on the story you're telling. If they don't, then more than likely your story is either a tragedy or a cautionary tale or both. But in most stories, they do overcome it. So your theme is a statement of them overcoming that limiting belief and what their new belief is at the end of the story. So just to give you a very, very broad, non-specific example, let's say that your character's limiting belief is that she is ugly. And throughout the course of the story, she learns something that is the opposite of that. So, you know, of course it could just be that she is beautiful. I would hope you would be a little more specific than that. So maybe it's, I mean, it could be beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I'm thinking something more like, doesn't matter what other people think. No matter what you look like, you be your own kind of beautiful. You shouldn't ascribe to a particular paradigm of beauty. Or maybe it's just that if she believes she's beautiful, then she's beautiful, no matter what. You know, so you come up with like the opposite that she is going to come to realize and believe at the end of the story. The statement of that belief is your theme, okay? Very often, just to give you another hint, authors will have a scene in which the character actually sort of yells this out. I mean, again, this is not something you have to do in your story, but if in the climactic moment they come to some realization and they say it, you know, maybe yell it at the villain or the antagonist or something, more than likely that is your theme. All right, so just to give you a little hint, if you have something like that, you may already know what your theme is, you just don't realize it. So the reason it's so important to know what this is before you start writing is because the climactic moment of your story, of course, it is the time when physically, you know, on the 3D plane, your protagonist and their main antagonist are coming face to face. Okay, that is what we usually understand the climactic moment to be. In my 10 plot points, I call it the climactic face-off because they need to come face to face with their antagonist in the story. But there's also another level to it because your climax is also when, on a much more spiritual plane for the character, your character is going to come face to face with their own limiting belief. And if you don't know what that limiting belief is, whether they're going to overcome it, and if so, how, then how can you be absolutely certain that every part of your story is relevant to that theme? The answer is you can't. Ta-da! You just created an unfocused story that will not create emotion for your reader, that will not create catharsis, and that will not be easily marketable, and at best may have mediocre sales. All right? This is why you need to know what your theme is before you start writing. I don't want any of that for you. I want you to write a deeply cathartic story that your readers love, that they will read over and over again, that they will gush about, that they will, you know, talk about on TikTok, and that it will make them come back to you again and again for everything you write because you know how to write a story that makes them feel something. Okay, that is what our goal is. So remember that you need to know your theme before you start writing, and to figure it out, you're going to need your story ending, your character's limiting belief, and how they are going to change and overcome it or not, just depending on what kind of story you're telling. So please, oh please, do not just start writing and hope the theme will come to you. I mean, it's kind of what I always say with pantsing. If you want to do that, nobody's stopping you. But once you do figure out what your theme is, what I'm going to say is that in order to write a focused story, you need to scrap everything you've already written, like 100% of it, and start again telling the story with that theme in mind so that you're writing to that theme. And the only reason I tell people not to do that, I mean, yes, of course, it's going to take a lot longer. You're going to have to throw away a lot of words. And, you know, for me, I can't stand that. So I plan as much as I can at the beginning so that I don't have to throw away words in time. But even if you're okay with all of that, the harsh truth, and be very, very honest with yourself about this, most people will not do it. They will not throw away all of those words after they've already written them. They'll just say, no, 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 I'll just go back through and sprinkle my theme here, here, and here, and it'll be fine. And again, I mean, there are not police for this. No one's going to know if you do that or not. But again, you are leaving so much emotion on the table when you do that. And you will not have as powerful a story if you do that. I guarantee it. That's why I would prefer that you plan your theme before you write your story and that you write to that theme throughout the entire story, because then it will be focused. It will be very cohesive. You will have had the theme in mind the whole time, and you don't have to go through and scrap all those words and feel like you wasted a lot of time. Okay, so I'm asking you to do this to help you because I know that most people are just not going to start over. If they've written an entire draft of their story and not until the very end do they figure out what the theme is, they don't want to do all that work again. And I get it. I understand why. But once again, when that happens, they dial in everything else, their cover, their blurb, they get their marketing right, and then they say, why isn't my book selling? Because you're not creating a deeply enough emotional experience for the reader. That's why. And I always say you need to create the catharsis, right? You need to manufacture catharsis. That also comes through the internal arc. And I promise you, if you do not have your theme dialed in, and if you are not making sure that every scene in your book is relevant to that theme, is heading toward it or away from it in some very specific and intentional way, you are not going to be able to create that catharsis for your reader. Okay? All right, so, excuse me. So if you want more help with this, if you want to know exactly what questions to ask to learn this for your story and about your characters, if you want to know how to tap into your own God-given subconscious creativity to come up with answers for your story that are unique to you, your life, your beliefs, and your experiences to make the story uniquely yours, if you want to write deeply cathartic, cohesive stories around a central theme that will help your readers feel big emotion and become mega fans, then Legendary Fiction Forge is for you. I have an entire module in there right now, guys, on figuring out what your theme is, as well as the module that I talked about before the intro on how to write protagonists that jump off the page. I have editing for passive voice, which gets rid of the amateur-sounding sentences in your writing and produces a ridiculously clean manuscript. You get 2 Q&As with me a month to get all your questions answered, and we can even work on your individual outlines, blurbs, etc. during those Q&As, just time permitting. Best of all, we have a community of wonderful, super supportive authors in there with the same goals as you, which is to serve their readers by writing emotionally cathartic stories, up-leveling humanity, and living off their fiction royalties. So if any of that resonates with you, go to bit.ly/fictionforge, which will also be in the show notes, and I hope to see you inside. Thanks so much for listening today. I will be back next week with more emotional engineering for fiction authors. Remember that you have a story inside you that only you can tell, so I cannot wait to see what you come up with when you get started. Bye, guys.